Now, in this question, there's this financial institution that accepts $85,000 from a customer, and this institution promises that it will provide 8% interest to the customer. And then it turns out that the customer is going to leave that amount of money inside this fund for 10 years. So what that means is that by the end of 10 years, that customer is going to retrieve this $85,000 plus 10 years of 8% interest. And so this is going to be a liability. This is going to be an outflow in 10 years' time. So now the company wants to immunize against this. So it's going to try to create some assets to kind of counteract this. So the idea is to take the money and then to generate these assets over here. So it's going to take $35,000 and they're going to buy a 5-year zero coupon bond with 8% interest, 8% yield. And there's also going to be $50,000 going into a preferred stock that is also going to yield 8% of yield. So now we want to find whether this strategy can actually immunize what we're facing over here. So let's draw a diagram to see what's happening. So we have this liability, we have this outflow at the end of 10 years. This outflow is going to be $85,000 times 1.08 to the power of 10, because the company promised to provide 8% interest to the customer. Now for the assets, we're going to have two things. We're going to have a zero coupon bond that is going to last for 5 years. And then we're putting in $35,000 for the zero coupon bond. So the amount that we're going to get, so this is going to be a cash outflow. And over here, these are inflows. So for assets, they're inflows. For liabilities, they're outflows. So now, for the assets, we're going to have this $35,000, and plus the interest. So there's going to be a 8% yield. And then second of all, there's also going to be this preferred stock. It's going to yield 8%. So what this means is that when we buy a preferred stock, so we're going to put $50,000 into the preferred stock, and then the dividends are going to be handed out to us equal to $50,000 times the yield. So this the strategy, the cash flow of a preferred stock is described in one of the earlier lecture notes. So in case you don't know, it's essentially just a perpetuity. So you get 50,000 times 0.08 in time 1, and then in time 2 you get the exact same thing. You get the same thing in time 3 all the way to infinity. So it's essentially just a perpetuity. So here is a visualization of what the cash flows are. So now, in order to determine whether immunization can be achieved, let us first compare whether PA is equal to PL. So first of all, for PA, this is going to be evaluated at a certain interest rate I. So these cash flows over here, these are concrete cash flows. We're promised that we're going to get this amount of money in the future. But then in this case, we're going to use this as a function because later on we're going to have to take the derivative with respect to I. And so over here we have this $50,000 times 0.08, and we're going to receive this at every single time point. So essentially we have a perpetuity. So if the interest rate doesn't change, if it stays at 0.08, then it's perfectly fine. Then the present value is, of course, what we invested inside. It's just $50,000. But if the interest rate changes, then we will have to use this formula. And then at time 5, we're also going to receive this amount of money. So divided by 1 plus I to the power of 5. And so we also have our PL. This is the liability, and the liability is just $85,000. So when we construct PL, we can drop the negative sign. So it's a negative here because it's an outflow, but when we calculate PL, this is in the perspective of the amount of cash outflow. We don't need to deal with the negative sign. So we have $85,000, and then we times 1.08 to the power of 10. So this is the actual amount of cash flow. And then at an interest rate I, the present value is dividing this by 1 plus I to the power of 10. So here's our PA and a PL. So of course, when we want to find whether the strategy is going to create immunization for us, so currently the interest rate is 8%. So first of all, we investigate whether at 8% currently, this is going to give us immunization. So we want PA to be equal to PL. And by definition, this must be true because this on the right-hand side, this of course is $85,000. And then this is really just a split of the $85,000 into the zero coupon bond and the, as well as the preferred stock, right? So in the end, the left-hand side must also be $85,000. And as you can see, if you substitute 0.08, that is indeed the case. So this is pretty trivial. This has to be true.